Okay, we're good.
This is Q&A at the Film Fest by Laura Maylene Walter. When my brother Maurice and I were kids, we buried Pepsi bottles out in the woods and set off bottle rockets, convincing our sister Selma that they were landmines. Once, I set one off too close to Maurice without warning him, and the rocket struck him just below his right eye. I could have blinded him, but all he got was a raw-edged scar the shape of a star on his cheek. Instead of embracing it, a scar. Girls love scars. He grew ashamed and shy, forever putting a hand to his face to hide it. Now Maurice lives in a small city in upstate New York with a girlfriend named Rose and a black and white cat that snuck into the guest room my first night there to piss in my sheets. The big event that weekend was the International Film Fest, which Maurice could not have been more excited about. Now, I've never been to a film fest before, international or not, and if the rest of the movies were anything like what we watched earlier this afternoon, I might be better off staying in and chancing the cat piss. You ready, Brian? Maurice slipped into a leather jacket so worn it was practically orange. There were many things I wanted to say to my little brother, not just about his jacket, but about his hobbies and his approach to life in general. But this weekend was no time to turn it against me. So instead, I followed him mutely out the door and down the street to his car, which by the looks of it had become the target for every bird that had to take a shit in a 20-mile radius. Our first movie of the evening was a Swedish drama. The plot went like this. For 7 years, a young girl is sentenced to a kitchen to make the same vat of soup over and over. She never sees who she's feeding, and the ingredients never change. Celery, chickpeas, carrots, onion, a little bit of salt, one bay leaf. That's it. When the girl is released on her 16th birthday, she walks outside and an old man hands her an orange. She stands looking at it for a long time, turning it over in her hands. Finally, she throws it into a trash can and walks off into the distance. The lights came on in the theater to reveal Maurice wiping his eyes. Can you believe that? He asked. I know, right? I thought that old man would at least try to hit on her or something. Maurice put on his jacket. No, the orange. She didn't even recognize it as food. Really got to me. What got to me was how my brother turned into this gigantic douchebag without my even noticing. On our way to the next theater, a Film Fest volunteer stepped in front of us. He looked exactly like every other volunteer there, male or female. 19 years old with greasy hair, plastic framed glasses, tattooed arms, tight jeans with wide cuffs, and a t-shirt with an ironic slogan. This one actually said, "Look at my ironic shirt." I can't make this up. Can't go in, fellas. Movie's been delayed. What? Maurice frowned. Start times are never delayed, ever. I know, our hipster told us. He leaned in to confide something further since he clearly recognized Maurice as a kindred spirit. This is a director's spot movie, and the director is so not ready. He's in back puking into a trash can. Get the hell out of here. Maurice started wringing his Film Fest booklet into a tight tube. That's intense. So it's postponed, the volunteer concluded. 1 hour. Awesome, we can eat. I grabbed Maurice by his jacket and steered him toward the exit. Let's get a beer and burger at that Pear and Fag place or whatever. The Pear and Fig, Maurice said, struggling to look back as I ushered him out. Don't you think we should hang around just in case? You heard the little dude. Director's puking his guts out. Leave him be. We rode through the crowds to cross the street and enter the Pear and Fig. I ordered us both talls of the beer on special, something from the UK that I didn't recognize, but it looked like it would go down okay. I noticed the waitress checking out Maurice's scar, but he was oblivious and went on tapping his fingers against the table and then against the beer glass. He was always a tapper, even back in high school. I used to tell him he should take up track with me to let go of that energy instead of tapping on his desk like a goddamn nerd, but it only got worse. In his junior year, he started playing the French horn. So, which is your favorite movie so far? Maurice asked. I closed my eyes and pretended to think. The Mexican one, I said. That one at least had a hot actress. The final scene was a stunner, Maurice agreed. The way the hoof prints just faded away into the sand like that? Definitely. I waved over the waitress and ordered the blue cheeseburger. Maurice got a 10-inch pizza with goat cheese. Didn't this place have any plain old American cheddar? I took a long pull from my beer and signaled for another. What the hell? If I had to watch this next film, which was Japanese and apparently a revealing glimpse into the contradictions and unexpected joys of the human condition, I might as well be loaded. Drink up, I told Maurice, and watched as he brought the beer to his lips. He told me at Christmas 2 years ago that he prefers wine for the antioxidants. Now, if it wasn't for that girlfriend of his who had strawberry blonde hair and a little heart-shaped mouth, I might start to worry. But then I reminded myself to focus. This might be my best opportunity all weekend. So, Maurice, I began, wondering if it was best to start with how I've had 0 job leads since the foundry laid me off a couple of months ago, or if I should focus instead on the medical bills for my knee. Or maybe I should just dive right into my idea for the brew pub. Maurice had always been a dreamer himself. Hell, maybe he'd want to be a full partner. He could move to Indianapolis and open the place with me. Might even be fun. Wait, he blurted out. I have something to tell you. I sat back in the booth and put my hand around my cold beer. A few more film fest types filtered into the pub. You could tell who they were by that dazed, I just saw 10 movies in a row looking around. For people who claim they wanted to discover the mysteries and wonder of life, you'd think they'd get outside a little more instead of cramming together in the dark to read dialogue tracking across the bottom of the screen. All right, I said, hoping he was about to tell me his life felt meaningless, the kind of void that could only be filled by a new and exciting business venture. Shoot. Maurice picked up his napkin and folded it in half, then in half again. He said. What? Spit it out. Mom's married. She's what? She got married to this guy from DC. They met online last year. Mom was on dating sites? Hell, I go on dating sites. No, it wasn't like that. They met on some forum for people who want to learn how to prepare for big emergencies like natural disasters, the end of the world, you know. Mom is worried about the end of the world? What? Who isn't? Jesus Christ, Maurice. So she married some random guy who thinks the world is going to end? That's great. That's just fucking great. Settle down. He's not that bad. You met the motherfucker? The waitress arrived with our food. She gave me my burger and slid the pizza in front of Maurice and then got the hell out of there. Yeah, he said, I was kind of at the wedding. I took a few slow, deep breaths. They sounded more like wheezes. Was Selma there? Selma lived in Sacramento with her husband and 3 rescued pit bulls. She hated leaving those dogs for anything. Of course Selma was there, Maurice said. And then he shut his mouth and reached for the salt. He shook it hard all over his pizza without looking up. Christ, I said. I wanted to ask you to go into business with me. You know, open a restaurant, a brew pub maybe. And not this. Maurice looked up surprised. Why would I invest in that? You do know that new restaurants have something like a 90% failure rate, right? Besides, he went on, taking another sip of beer. He looked remarkably relaxed now. Rose is pregnant. At this point, I slammed the rest of the second beer and without even looking around for the waitress, shouted out for another one. We're not planning on getting married, at least not right away, Maurice said. I realized he'd been holding this in the whole time, just dying to blurt it out. We want to focus on the baby for now. We're looking at houses. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a realty guide. Rose wants a fenced yard, and a garage, and an extra room so she can have an art studio. When the waitress came with my beer, I told her I'd changed my mind and would take the check instead. No, I let Maurice pay, of course. As he slipped the credit card back in his wallet, he looked up at me. You still want to see this movie? Obviously, I wanted to say no. But I also knew that this might be the last year Maurice could enjoy the film fest without a screaming kid tying him down. Yeah, I said, let's go see it. We eased out of the booth. Maurice led the way. Maybe it was the beer or the fact that he was going to be a father, but I noticed that maybe he walked a little taller, a little stronger than I remembered. And that only pissed me off more. Of all the weird shit I've seen in my life, this Japanese movie took the grand prize. The director, a skinny, feminine-looking dude wearing what I swear was an ascot and pointy-toed shoes, stood up in the front of the theater and in the beginning to say in heavily accented English, "I made this movie for my brothers." He paused and looked around. His face was bright red and his neck too, what we could see of it, behind the ascot. "You are my brothers," he added lamely, and then he sat down and the theater lights dimmed. The movie was full of characters that were half human, half something else. For example, it opened to show a man with an automatic bread maker in his belly getting married to a woman with silver teaspoons for hair. Her head jingled whenever she moved, and in the sunlight she gave off halos and rainbows. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered to Maurice, but he ignored me. I slouched in my seat and resigned myself to the movie. There wasn't much dialogue, but I didn't bother much with the subtitles anyway. I needed to think. In high school, I was always the one who got the girls. I was a track star, a basketball player, a swimmer, and I had the body to prove all of it. Somehow I ended up unemployed in Indianapolis, and the single dream I could come up with, starting my own brew pub, died before it even had a chance. Now I was forced to finish out this weekend watching bullshit movies before getting in my car and making the long drive back to Indiana alone. When the movie was over, the director held a Q&A, but the questions were ridiculously stupid. Well, a couple of guys kept asking process questions like, "What kind of camera do you use, and would you recommend I make my first movie with the same one?" Or, "Do you have to get releases from all the people who appear in the background of the street shots?" To make it worse, the director wasn't very fluent in English, so he had a hard time both understanding the questions and formulating responses. Of course, the film fest hadn't provided a Japanese-English translator. That would have made too much sense. I was embarrassed for everyone involved. Maurice must have noticed because 10 minutes into the questions, he looked at me and said, "Let's get out of here." We left the theater and headed straight home. When we walked into the apartment, we found Rose asleep on the couch with an Afghan draped over her body. "God damn, Maurice, I hadn't gotten a girl like that in years." Rose stirred when she heard us come in. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. "I missed you," she told Maurice. I rolled my eyes and walked into the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator and stared inside. Maurice and Rose had lots of eggs, all lined up neatly in the egg tray on the door. They also had a head of iceberg lettuce, organic peanut butter, sliced turkey, a half-gallon of soy milk, and about a dozen containers of yogurt. I reached down to open the vegetable crisper and found asparagus, a red bell pepper, and a package of mushrooms. Even with the hum of the refrigerator, I could still hear Rose and Maurice talking in low tones in the next room. I stood up and closed the refrigerator door, then leaned on it. Against my better judgment, I found myself thinking of that crazy couple in the Japanese movie. When they made love on their wedding night, the spoon woman tilted her head back, sending a rain of tinkling sounds down her spine and into the sheets. Afterward, they lay side by side on the bed while steam crept from the man's bread maker's stomach. Later in the movie, we learned a new life baked there, down below his heart. I left the kitchen without a word to Maurice and Rose and headed into the guest bedroom. That little shitter Classy was sitting on my bed looking at me. "Jesus Christ," I told Classy. He just stared, his eyes huge and golden. It appeared he had not taken a piss, so that was nice. "Little asshole," I said. "You smell like ass. Anyone ever tell you that?" Classy hesitated. Then he slid his eyes into a half-shut position, all right, relaxed and happy. "You like that? You like being called a little asshole?" Without trying, it let my voice get softer and slower. "You little black and white douchebag. Aren't you a little douchebag?" Classy started purring and kneading the blankets. I sat next to him exhausted and stroked his head. He leaned into my hand, encouraging me. "Yeah," I said, "same to you." I got under the covers and let Classy nap by my head. I lay there in the dark until I heard Maurice and Rose go to bed across the hall. Then the apartment was silent. I reached down on the floor for my jeans and dug through the pockets for my cell phone. It rang 4 times before my sister picked up. "Brian?" She hesitated. "Hey, Selma, how's the weather out there in good old Cali?" Selma breathed into the phone. "Oh, same as always," she said, her voice taking on that cheerful, careful, cheery tone I hated. "Sunny all weekend, you know." Ha ha. "Ha," I agreed. "Yeah, you sure love that California weather." "You bet." "I know how much you hate to leave it. even for a weekend. Even if, say, your own mother got married, am I right? Shit. Maurice wasn't supposed to say anything. How in the hell did everyone neglect to tell me she was getting married? You already know the answer to that question. Apparently I don't, Selma. Apparently I have no fucking clue why my entire family would conspire to keep me from my mother's wedding. Because you have a history. Remember Gilbert? Gilbert was my mother's boyfriend a few years ago. Gilbert was an isolated incident, I said. You called him a son of a bitch. Yeah, so? On Christmas Eve. Hey, the guy was a creep. Someone has to look out for Mom. Brian. Selma was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Me too, I said, and then I hung up on her. I dropped my phone on the bed and noticed that Classy was gone. Classy, I whispered. Where are you? I made a couple of psst, psst sounds. Come out, you little dumbass. The bedroom door was cracked, so I got up and crept into the hallway. I tiptoed into the living room, expecting to see Classy perched on his pet apartment or maybe crouched by the food dish, but what I found instead was Rose. She was lying on the couch again, alone in the dark, holding her hands against her stomach. She didn't look pregnant to me. I mean, her stomach was practically flat, but she held her hands like she was already 9 months along and waiting for the baby to come. She looked up and then followed my gaze to her stomach. I couldn't sleep, Rose said. Me either. I walked over and sat on Maurice's armchair. You're lucky you're skipping this film fest. It's pretty messed up. Like this Japanese movie we saw today, one of the characters was pregnant. Yeah? Rose shifted a little on the couch. Yeah. Only it was a dude. And the baby was a loaf of bread, baking in his bread maker's stomach. Rose stared at me for a few seconds. And then she laughed. Her head tilted back, and while she didn't have spoons for hair, I imagined she made those jangling metal sounds like in the movie. I guess I just don't get it, I told her. We were quiet for a moment. I came out here looking for the cat, I said, to fill the silence. He was in my room and then just disappeared. He does that. Sometimes he goes in the laundry room and hides in the dryer, or else he burrows under a big pile of clothes. I linked my hands behind my head and made the recliner bounce a bit. That reminds me of when Maurice and I were kids. We had this club, just him and me, and we dug a hideout in the woods. Rose watched me. How old were you? I don't know. 9 years old, 10. We'd be out there for hours. Rose nodded like I'd given her something to think about. I won't be able to sleep for a while, she said. You want to watch a movie? Maybe something a little more accessible? Sounds good. She got up and rummaged around their entertainment center, then held up a DVD case. Weekend at Bernie's. Perfect, I said. Rose put the movie in and hit play. The recliner was making me feel a little seasick, so I got up and sat next to Rose on the couch. She grabbed another blanket and tossed it at me. I haven't seen this in forever, she said. Me either. We watched even though we knew how it would play out. Those boneheads would bring Bernie up to all sorts of ridiculous contraptions to make him look alive. And for one weekend, he would be. I thought back to those times Maurice and I played in the fort we built in the woods, the smell of rotting and dirt and decay. How in the evening our mother would come outside looking for us. She hated walking through the scratchy undergrowth, and she'd remind us of that fact later. But for the time being, Maurice and I hid in our makeshift clubhouse laughing. When her back was turned, we'd leap out and run up behind her. She never knew about the hideout, so to her we had just appeared like magic. Or maybe, I reflected, she knew the whole time to just let us believe we were hidden. When I glanced over at Rose again, she was crying. She caught me looking and wiped her face. I turned back to the TV and saw Bernie's hand attached to fishing line flapping around. I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe the Japanese movie wasn't all that bad, I said. Rose pushed off the Afghan. Tell me about it. The director was there to take questions afterward, I said. He told us that he wanted to make a movie about marriage. That's all it was about? Marriage? I guess so. He said that even though his characters are so unusual, bread maker body parts and spoons for hair, they're really just like us. Rose frowned like she wasn't sure whether she should believe me. And then Maurice asked a question, he said. He did? Of course he did. He asked, did you make this for your wife? And the director said yes, he did. But that every time he tries to make a film about his love for his wife, he fails. Just fails again and again, yet he can't stop trying. And Maurice totally got it. Oh, Rose said. Exactly, I told her. Do you know what first attracted me to him, Rose asked. She wasn't making eye contact anymore. The scar on his face. And it wasn't because it made him look dangerous. Nothing could make Maurice look dangerous. Rose smiled faintly. It looked like he had a past. Like he needed someone to take care of him. And even though he didn't have that, he got by anyway. I was the one who gave him that scar, I said. She nodded. I know. After a few moments of silence, Rose nestled into the couch in a way that brought her body a few inches closer to mine. I waited a couple more minutes and then reached out and put my hand on Rose's stomach, about where I imagined the baby might be. Rose didn't move. I thought of my mother sitting with her husband in D.C., the two of them surrounded by stacks of canned food, flashlights, batteries, jug after jug of water. And then there was Selma out in California with her slaughtering pit bulls and her husband. And Maurice asleep in the next room, sleeping with the scar side of his face against the pillow. Rose was wearing just a thin cotton tank top, and it was easy enough to slide my hand under the shirt and onto her bare skin to feel her heat. In the heartbeat of her body, I imagined the other life just beginning there. She reached up and touched my face gently in the place where Maurice had his scar. Meanwhile, another life played out before us on a screen. Even after I closed my eyes, I could still see the flickering movements of light from the TV where people spoke from the script and had their whole lives mapped out. My eyes were still closed when I heard footsteps and then Maurice's voice asking, "What the hell?" Rose shot up straight on the couch as Maurice stared at me, clear-eyed and furious. The glow from the TV showed the smooth outline of his face and his eyes. His scar didn't exist in the dark. It was like we didn't even know each other, like we weren't brothers at all. I was just a stranger in his apartment who had touched his pregnant girlfriend's stomach and, for a moment, wished something of his could be mine.